World News Today, brought to you by Admiral Corporation in behalf of distributors and dealers all over America and in many foreign lands. By shortwave broadcast direct from important overseas stations and leading news centers of our own country, CBS reporters are waiting to bring you first-hand news from the world's political and battlefronts. But first, here's Douglas Edwards.
British troops at the eastern end of the Normandy line today have uncorked a powerful new drive near Caumont. And to the east, the Americans have not been stopped in their push southward. On Europe's eastern front, the Russians are closing in on Warsaw, and the city's suburbs already are under artillery fire. Hitler has ordered Warsaw's garrison to hold out at all costs. In Italy, Allied armies are moving into position for an all-out attack on the German Gothic line. The British Eighth Army is reported about 7 miles from Florence, and the Germans have moved 5 rather tired divisions into the region. On Pacific war fronts, American forces have occupied Orote Peninsula, and we now control more than 2/3 of Tinian Island. And the B-29s have carried out another raid on the Manchurian steel plants and the Chinese port. And now for our first news direct from overseas, Admiral takes you to Normandy. Bill Downs reporting.
The British Second Army is making slow but steady progress in its new drive south of Caumont, advancing up to 3 miles through the difficult wooded farmland of this hilly, fruit-growing sector. Although there has been nothing particularly sensational in today's fighting on this British front, the new attack is going well, and gains are considered satisfactory. Early this morning, I went down to a forward observation post in a front-line village during the early part of the Second Army's new attack. At the forward headquarters, I met a young British lieutenant who looked all the world like a schoolteacher playing soldier. The lieutenant smiled politely when I asked the way to the observation post, and then apologized for going first as we started through the rubble of the town towards the battle position. We went around yards and between houses and had to climb over some rubble. "You'll have to pardon all this mess," the lieutenant said. "A shell hit here a half hour ago and pulled the rubble down." He apologized again when we had to crawl through a hole in a stone wall. "We've been meaning to make that hole larger. Dashed uncomfortable having to crawl through such a small space." And we finally came to the building which housed the observation post. On the door of the building were the uncomfortable words, "The enemy is watching you." On the wall opposite was the note, "Do not." The lieutenant grinned a little sheepishly. "We got another shell here this morning. Put the signs up to keep the chaps from getting careless, you know." And we climbed to the top of the house up under the gabled roof. A bomb had conveniently lifted a few shingles out of the roof to form perfect peepholes overlooking the battlefield. The battlefield itself actually was a little disappointing. The countryside here is so close with high hedges, small fields, and a large number of trees that visibility is limited. Even on this height, at the top of the building, you could see only shell-burst bomb craters and the whitish, yellowish smoke of battle. But the lieutenant, who I believe is the politest man in the world, reached a new high in courtesy. A shell landed nearby. Dust fell from the rafters all over us. And when we got to our feet and looked around us and took a deep breath, the lieutenant brushed the dust from his shoulders. "Sorry about that," he said. And then he grinned. "We're fixing it now so that it'll never happen again." And this is Bill Downs in Normandy returning you to Admiral Radio in New York.
And now a news report from Britain. Admiral takes you to London. Charles Collingwood reporting.
Here in London, there is just enough warlike activity going on to quiet one's conscience for being away from the battle zone. To be specific, there are flying bombs. If you were living in London or southern England, the chances are you would be like everyone else, considerably preoccupied with the pilotless planes. People seem under a curious compulsion to talk about every flying bomb they hear going overhead, where it might have come from, where it might have landed, whether its antics were in any way different from the run of visitations. And there is nothing about the lore of flying bombs which does not interest people. Probably ordinarily nothing interests you less than a chimpanzee. But if you were living in London now, you would find yourself fascinated by the revelation of the subtle qualities chimpanzees have revealed in regard to Hitler's secret weapon. It seems that lions and tigers and the other beasts in the zoo can't tell a flying bomb from any other noise. But not so the chimpanzee. Long before anyone else hears one coming, he begins to show all the signs of acute anxiety and goes and hides in his little house. When the bomb is burst, he comes out rather shamefacedly and goes about his business, even as the other inhabitants of London. This little tidbit of jungle information is regarded as of great interest here, like everything else that has anything to do with flying bombs. It would seem as though those who live in the areas where the bombs fall are under some curious compulsion to talk about them. And that may be the healthiest way to treat them, and one reason why this latest bombardment of London has failed as completely as the earlier one to prevent people from going about the work they have to do to win the war. This is Charles Collingwood in London, returning you to Admiral in New York.
More news in just a moment, but first here is Warren Sweeney with a message from Admiral Corporation.
The modern electric refrigerator has been a boon to millions of American homemakers. But who hasn't wished that the messy, bothersome job of regular defrosting could be eliminated forever? Well, your wish has come true. It's a post-war promise from Admiral. Admiral refrigeration engineers have produced a new two-temperature refrigerator that you never need to defrost. Not only that, but the new Admiral provides generous extra food storage. The frost-collecting coils that waste space and dry out food are gone. As a result, foods keep fresh and moist indefinitely in the new Admiral refrigerator without the use of covered dishes. And that isn't all. To give you double protection, Admiral has a Sterilamp. Ultraviolet rays purify the air, prevent odors, and destroy mold which causes food waste and spoilage. We know that you'll welcome the new Admiral two-temperature refrigerator just as enthusiastically as you approved Admiral Radio, America's smart set. Now, here once again is Douglas Edwards.
Today is the second birthday of the waves. And at the Higgins shipyards in New Orleans, CBS has set up microphones so that it, too, can join in the nationwide salute to the women's reserves. So to hear the highlight of this birthday party, Admiral takes you now to New Orleans, Bill Slocum, Jr., reporting.
Swinging precariously over my head are two PT boats, each worth over $500,000, and both gifts to the United States Navy, given as birthday presents by the Waves on this, their second birthday. At my side are two lovely Waves, Yeoman First Class Imogene Elliott of Austin, Texas, and Yeoman Second Class Barbara Marie Gibson of Oakland, California. Each has a bottle of New York State champagne clutched in a dainty and slightly nervous hand. And in a moment they'll christen the torpedo boats with the romantic names of 484 and 485. Gathered around us are several hundred very pleased-looking Waves, and standing beside us, looking pretty pleased himself, is Andrew J. Higgins, Mr. Higgins.
We build a lot of PT boats here, and usually we snake them off the assembly line, toss them in the water, and get them started on their important job just as soon as it is humanly possible. Today marks a slight departure from that practice. We are honored by many young ladies in the uniform of the Waves, and two of these Waves will soon christen those boats swinging over the canal. We, the builders, are proud to turn them over to the United States Navy through such charming representatives. When these boats arrive in the fighting zones, with their brave young fighting men aboard, they will carry with them something of the spirit which prompted these fine American women to join our Navy. We all say Godspeed to the boats, and thanks to the fine girls who left their homes, so that there could be ample fighting men to man these formidable craft. And let their example investing in war bonds from only a $50 per month base be an example to all others. It is now my pleasure to introduce Rear Admiral Andrew C. Bennett, Commandant of the 8th Naval District.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins. The Navy salutes the Waves for their most valuable contribution to the war effort. They have released well over 60,000 men from shore jobs for duty at sea. It is fitting that this date, the second anniversary of the Women's Reserve, has been chosen for the presentation of this contribution to the fighting fleets from the women of the shore establishment. These two motor torpedo boats have been purchased by the members of the Waves through the allocation of their war bond investment during the 5th War Loan Drive. The Waves on duty in the 12th Naval District, with headquarters at San Francisco, led the rest of the nation with a cash investment of more than $400,000. For this reason, 2 representatives of that naval district have been invited to attend today's ceremonies. The PT boats are numbers 484 and 485. As they go into battle, they will carry a plaque bearing this inscription. This fighting ship is sponsored and made possible by the war bond purchases of the members of the Women's Reserve of the United States Naval Reserve. And now, Yeoman Elliott and Yeoman Gibson will christen the vessels.
I christen the PT 485. I christen
Both
the
girls
PT
smashed together
484.
their bottles against the green hose. And now the PTs are about to be plopped into the canal. You can hear the hoist in the background, and maybe the splash of the boats, too. Now a couple more PT boats race around in the narrow channel gathered here. I wish I could describe the look on the faces of all the waves gathered here now. It's a half maternal, half martial look. A sort of look that says, there, you pretty darling little boats. Now go out and blow those Japs right out of the Pacific. I return you now to Admiral in New York.
And speaking of the Japs, in the Central and Southwest Pacific, we're continuing to hit the Japanese and hit them hard. For more details in the war against Japan, Admiral, after a few seconds' pause, takes you to Pearl Harbor. Webley Edwards reporting.
The first major phase for the Battle of Guam is completed with the capture of Oroti Peninsula. During the mop-up on the peninsula, our 10-mile front remained virtually unchanged. But patrol activity gave indication of further inland progress, with Oroti and Upper Harbor as a now solidly held springboard. Marines on Tinian have pushed the enemy into the southern end of the island with strong advances, backed by 7th Air Force Thunderbolt fighter assistance. With me here is the Chief of Staff of the 7th Air Force, Brigadier General William J. Flood. General, will you tell us something of Air Force activities out yonder?
2 days after Isley Field on Saipan had been taken from the Japs, fighter planes of the 7th Air Force arrived. A few hours later, Thunderbolts made their first attacks. Shortly after that, a Jap counterattack attempted to retake the field and for a while held one end of it. But operations continued at our end, and the P-47s continued to land and take off until the Japs were driven out. Since then, these planes have bombed or rocketed Jap gunning positions and strafed Jap troops to support American assault troops on Saipan and now on Tinian. Steadily across the Pacific, 7th Air Force heavy Liberator bombers, medium Mitchells, and gun fighters have proceeded or kept pace with invasion.
General Flood, this vast theater of operations must present some unusual problems.
Yes, the tremendous distances and the great stretches of water. You people in America cannot realize what it means to fight an air war over water. Over Europe, the majority of those men who are shot down are alive today and have an honorable status as prisoners of war. They can bail out. But there's no bailing out over the Pacific. You land your plane in the water and then get into a raft if you can. It isn't like the English Channel. That can be crossed in 10 or 15 minutes or even less. Over here, the Navy Air Wing and the 7th Air Force land-based planes fly over water for 10 or 15 hours.
I've noticed, General, that the flyers and crews have a sincere feeling of confidence that if they should go down, they'll be rescued.
They have, and that faith is based on the knowledge that everything humanly possible will be done. To the men of the 7th Air Force, as well as the Navy and Marine airmen, the possibility of rescue after a crash is of the utmost importance. It is one thing to say that they heroically accept the challenges of these dread waters, knowing that if they crash, all is lost. They do accept the challenge, but it is with the hope, the confidence, that the Navy and the 7th Air Force will rescue them regardless of material cost if it is humanly possible to do so.
Some miraculous rescues have been made by planes and ships, General.
Often these boys had about one chance in a million of being saved. The men know these stories, and they know if they come down, they are not going to be left there alone and forgotten to die. Every man is a precious unit because he is needed to carry on this fight, and because we pray he may go home one day to those who are waiting for him.
You have heard Brigadier General William J. Flood,
Chief of Staff of the 7th Air Force.
Thank you, sir. This is Webley Edwards in Hawaii.
I return you now to Admiral.
In New York.
Now here in our New York studios for a summary and analysis of developments on Europe's Eastern Front is Major George Fielding Elliott, Columbia's military analyst.
The Russian armies have now reached the right bank of the Vistula River for its entire course from the mouth of the River San up to the town of Deblin, about 50 miles southeast of Warsaw. And between Deblin and the vicinity of Warsaw, they are approaching the river at several points. The Germans admit that the Russian forces have crossed the Vistula, but claim to have thrown them back. It must be remembered that the Russian forces on the Vistula have advanced very rapidly during the past 10 days. Their supply system must be pretty well extended and under great strain. If the German resistance along the river is strong and well consolidated, the Germans may be able to hold for some time until the Russians can regroup their forces and bring forward a whole new series of supply depots to points much nearer the new front. Should the Russians be able to penetrate deeply and in force beyond the river within the next few days, it will then be time enough to begin to talk of the collapse of the German armies on the Eastern Front. The northern sector of that front is also at the moment of great strategic interest. Here, the greatest Russian gain has been their deep penetration between Dvinsk and Kaunas, which has resulted in the fall of Dvinsk and the partial encirclement of Kaunas. The Russians are now only 20 miles or so from the Gulf of Riga. The last main railway connecting Estonia and Latvia on the one hand with Germany on the other has been cut. Thus, the Northern Army Group of German armies under General Lindemann has been cut off from Germany by land and seems to be engaged in a fighting withdrawal to the west and northwest, with the eventual purpose of holding a beachhead in Estonia, which could be supplied or evacuated only by sea. This opens the way, as soon as Kaunas is taken, for a converging Russian drive on East Prussia from the north, east, and southeast. There is no doubt that the Germans have some time ago prepared strong defensive positions along the lines to which they are now being compelled to retire. Lines resting on the natural fortress of East Prussia, the rivers Nive and Vistula, and the Carpathian Mountains. The question which will determine their ability to defend these positions for any length of time is not the natural or artificial strength of the zones of defense, but whether the Germans have sacrificed so many men in outlying positions as to be unable to defend the shorter and better ones upon which they are now trying to stand. The loss of more than half the Central Army Group of Field Marshal von Busch in the Vitebsk-Zlobin area and the failure to pull back the Northern Army Group of General Lindemann while there was still time to do so are twin examples of a German strategy for which there is no orthodox military explanation. The total number of German divisions thus lost to the defense of the eastern frontier of Germany itself cannot be less than 35 and may be as high as 60. The Wehrmacht, lacking any central strategic reserve or even any pool of replacements, cannot afford losses such as these on the Eastern Front at the very moment when the Allies in the West are threatening to burst the bounds of the Normandy Peninsula and roll out into the wide expanse of France. Now here again is Douglas Edwards.
For today's news in Washington and to hear from a torpedo bomber pilot who took part in the recent battle off the Philippines, Admiral takes you now to Washington. Don Pryor reporting.
There's talk in some diplomatic quarters here of a possible big blow-up in the Balkans in the near future. If Turkey comes into the war on our side, Bulgaria might topple suddenly, and after that, the rest of the Balkans conceivably could be knocked down like a row of 10 pins. Congress comes back to work next Tuesday, but only theoretically. Some of the leaders are worried about getting caught short with no adequate reconversion legislation when Germany falls. But in spite of the danger, there's not much promise of early action. Late one afternoon, not long ago, a flock of torpedo bombers from Task Force 58 caught up with a Jap fleet somewhere east of the Philippine Islands. Here's the pilot of one of those planes with a first-hand report. He's Lieutenant Junior Grade Benjamin C. Tate of Pulaski, Virginia. Ben, can you describe the Jap fleet as you first saw it?
It was a pretty thrilling sight. It seemed to be their whole fleet. I counted 8 carriers.
Well, how about battleships?
I don't know how many there were altogether, but there were 2 in the second group that we went after.
Who's we?
3 of us from Air Group 24 picked out the biggest carrier in the second group of the Jap fleet.
Well, did the Japs seem to know you were there by the time you started down?
I'll say they did. The air was full of ack-ack even before we started down from 12,000 feet. It was the heaviest I've ever seen. It kept getting heavier all the way down.
But did all three of you in that group go in together?
From different directions. Lieutenant J.G. George Brown of Rochester, New York, the leader of our group, circled to the right and came in toward the bow of the carrier. I went straight down the middle, and Lieutenant J.G. Warren Omark circled to the left and came in toward the starboard amidships. The carrier was turning violently, but we had him pretty well boxed in.
Well, and how did it work out?
Lieutenant Brown landed the first torpedo just a few seconds before mine, and Lieutenant Omark dropped his immediately after. All three caught him squarely amidships.
Well, how did you know exactly what happened?
Well, when Brown went into his dive, part of his right wing was blown off by ack-ack, and his plane caught fire. It was so badly shot up and burned that Brown's gunner and radio operator jumped. They landed on the water right near the carrier and stayed there all night. They had a ringside seat. They saw the torpedoes hit and watched the carrier catch on fire, saw her shake from internal explosion, and watched her burn far into the night. The last they saw of her, she was standing bow down in the water with her screws high in the air.
Well, how did they get back to tell that story?
The Navy picked them up the next day.
And what happened to Brown?
He was lost. I picked him up later after we got away from the Japs and flew on his wing for a while to guide him in. But I finally lost him in the clouds.
But in spite of being on fire with his crew gone and shot up pretty badly himself, he finished his run and torpedoed that carrier?
That's right. I've never seen anything that could equal it.
Well, that sounds as if it's worth the Congressional Medal of Honor at least. Well, now, how about you? How did you get that wound in your hand?
My stick was shot off right above my hand just after I dropped my torpedo. It took away my trigger and my bomb release, but we got back all right, almost. We had to land in the water about 9:30 that night because we ran out of gas. They had all the fleet lit up for us, and we came down near a destroyer. We got into a rubber raft. Johnny Sawicki, radioman, flashed an SOS on his tiny waterproof flashlight, and the destroyer gave a Roger with their biggest searchlight. In a few minutes, they had us aboard in their best bunks on the ship. That's the story.
Yes, that's the story of one Japanese carrier. And now I return you to Admiral in New York.
Crews of American B-29 super fortresses reported today that they left a mass of flaming ruins in Anshan, Manchuria, Japan's second-largest iron and steel-producing center, in their raids against three major enemy objectives on Saturday. Two super fortresses are missing after the widespread operations, which apparently confused the Japanese Air Command. In addition to Anshan, the big bombers hit Tangku, port of Tientsin, at the mouth of the Hai River, and the railway center of Qingshan, a junction of the Peiping to Hankow Railway. Only light fighter opposition and weak and inaccurate anti-aircraft fire was encountered over Anshan. Planes in other operations reported fighter opposition, but said it generally was dispirited, and the superforts either drove it away or ran away from it easily. 2 enemy planes probably were shot down, and 5 were damaged. And now, once again, here is Warren Sweeney with a word from Admiral.
If it's good reception and smart style that will influence your purchase of a new post-war radio, then your choice will be Admiral. Aeroscope, Magnaband, Slide Away, Touch-O-Matic. These famous Admiral firsts help to make Admiral the world's largest manufacturer of radio phonographs with automatic record changers. The Admiral radio of tomorrow will bring you not only the finest features of yesterday, but an impressive array of new firsts in models to meet every need and personal preference. There'll be a complete line of Admiral table radios from which you can choose that extra set you've been wanting for the kitchen, the playroom, or Dad's den. There'll be a new line of Admiral featherweight portables, including the famous 3-way AC-DC battery Bantam. You'll certainly want one as your companion during leisure hours, on the beach, at picnics, or during weekends in the country. And if you live on a farm, away from the power line, Admiral will have special models for you, packed with surprise features. Yes, Admiral promises much, but the record shows that Admiral delivers much. That is why it will pay you to wait after Victory Radio. World News Today is brought to you each Sunday at this hour by Admiral Corporation, makers of Admiral Radio, America's Smart Set, and post-war makers of Admiral refrigerators, Admiral home freezers, Admiral Electric Ranges. Be sure to listen again next Sunday when Admiral brings you World News Today by shortwave, direct from leading news centers of the world. Warren Sweeney speaking.